coming up next on The Health Hustle.
But I would probably say get a coach. The quickest piece of advice. You can't do this on your own. You need someone to hold you accountable. You need a coach. I'm very big on coaching. I have tons of coaches at any given time. I like to outsource most of that type of stuff. And I was overconfident when I was younger, which was good, but which led to a lot of suffering. And I probably wouldn't, I always say this, I wouldn't have probably listened to myself though. My 21-year-old self was so sure of himself that I would have been oh, fuck off, old man. What are you telling me to do? It's no, you don't understand. I am you.
Yeah.
In a different timeline. Not in this one, buddy.
What up, y'all? This was a very fun and unique episode for you guys where I got a chance to sit down with Blake Eastman, who has a background in psychology and nonverbals. Blake was an adjunct professor at the City University of New York for 6 years, where he taught general psychology, developmental psychology, and group dynamics. He also played poker professionally and is the founder of the School of Cards, which is the first brick-and-mortar poker school in New York City. He also spent 3 years traveling the world and actively exploring the cross-cultural differences in behavior and communication between all of these cultures. And so you can very quickly see he understands a thing or two about human behaviors and psychology. Some of the things that we got into specifically though in this episode are why he's an entrepreneurial extremist, the false narratives we believe about ourselves, tax write-offs in business, which is actually a fun and interesting conversation, and I like the way that he approaches it, essential business skills, or more specifically, what are the essential skills to create a six-figure business? How to build a world-class course or just general course creation, historical biases, his belief on the news and how we all sort of live in our own form of an echo chamber, body language versus nonverbals, those are not the same thing, digital nuances and the different social media platforms, why it's important to know we're all going to die, that was actually a very fun conversation as well, endurance athlete addicts, something I can relate to, a nonverbal communication masterclass, how he used Tim Ferris to essentially vet who has now become his wife, a rapid fire question round, and so much more. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, one of the most common reasons that I see this is not having a well-defined niche. If you go to the link in the description, I have a free 3-step process that walks you through exactly how to get clarity on which niche is best suited for you and your business. Without further ado, let's go. Blake Eastman, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. I'm good.
We got connected via Molly.
Yeah.
First time I met you, I knew nothing about you. It was at your house. We were doing a podcasting meetup networking deal with other podcasters. Mm-hmm. I think I saw you for all of 4 seconds.
Yeah, sitting and out.
And then I was like, what happened? Where do you go? And she's like, he's always busy. And I was like, oh, okay. So, which I feel like is obviously true. You're a very, very busy man. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. So where I want to go with your journey though, is you have a very interesting entrepreneurship journey. You seem to have been doing it for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I would like to go back to ground zero of that journey as a child. Where did that even begin for you? What was your first passion, obsession, desire when you were younger?
It's a good question. My family always says we don't know where you came from, because I think I was the first entrepreneurial person in the family. I could remember doing little hustles and things truthfully for as long as I can remember. I mean, I was an actor at a very young age. So I've been working since I'm 5, I would say. And I've only had one job in my life, which was at a tie-dye t-shirt company when I was in high school. And then I had all these hustles. So I remember buying and selling PlayStation 2, buying 5 at Best Buy and selling them for double. I remember I just always saw the world as sort of this opportunity and way of creating and making money. And I think I always had this desire when I was younger to have money. I didn't grow up, I grew up in a family with an incredible amount of love and support and structure. I never didn't know where food came from, but there wasn't money for extras. So I was allowed to get I remember my mom once, I wanted a pair of shoes. And my mom said something if I had it, I would get you whatever you want, but we don't have it, right? And I remember always having that desire to get what I want, I guess what the nature is. So yeah, I just did a lot of hustles, man. In high school, I mean, if anybody knows it, like there was a generation, at least in New York City, that you'd buy Uptowns, like Air Force Ones now, they were called Uptowns. And there was this time where people were like sewing like patent leather on the check mark, or like Gucci fabric, or like all those different things. That was a hustle of mine. I did that in my school. Like I bought and resell clothing. I added ringtones on people's phones. I had like a little remember MySpace?
Mm-hmm. Tom.
Yeah, good Tom. I had this little hustle where I was designing people's custom MySpace pages with like CSS and design and all that. Yeah, it's been an ongoing thing. I think my first real business though was I made a t-shirt company called Stamped and Branded when I was like maybe 18 or 19 and sold t-shirts in Union Square in New York City. I've just been hustling. I've been doing stuff for a long time. Listen, in terms of the entrepreneurial spectrum, I'm like an extremist.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time understanding why somebody wouldn't want to be an entrepreneur. Like I have to remind myself, like people that work for me, I'll be like, why don't you just start your own thing? Like I don't really understand why you're still working for me. And now I get it a little bit more in terms of the risk thresholds and tolerance. But yeah, I've been at every journey and every problem and every success. And I just like to be 100% control over my own destiny. And I feel like being an entrepreneur is the perfect application of that.
Yeah, I think even like the risk statement, though, I found interesting, even when I first started dabbling in it, is that there is I almost feel like a false belief that we feel like entrepreneurship is riskier than having a job. And I think most people came to that realization as well through the pandemic, when everybody was, out of work, or a lot of people were, especially tech companies, and all of a sudden they were like, whoa, okay, maybe I'm not as safe as secure as I thought I was.
Yeah, that's a weird narrative. That's an old narrative, right? It's like 60s, 70s, being a company person and working for a company for 40 or 50 years. Truth is, you can just get fired at any given moment. So I've never believed that as safety. Safety, and to me, is like skill sets more than anything else.
Facts. And relationships.
Yeah, and the ability just to generate when you need to, despite the circumstances. But that's probably been a gift and a curse for me, honestly. I just also have a very high, my ability to take risks, they're all calculated and blah, 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 blah. But my threshold is just higher than most.
Yeah.
So like I could, for years, I could have like, in my earlier entrepreneurial days, I was good at the creation and the product side, very bad at the management of money and all. Like I've had the IRS, them forget. A big moment in my life was, when was this? 2017, I think. I got like a letter 2 days before Christmas, and the IRS was like, "You owe us $750K. See you in court in 3 months," kind of thing. Southern District of New York. But then there's like this thing where everybody like fears the IRS, right? And I didn't do anything illegal or anything. I just didn't file my taxes. I kept delaying them, and then you deal with the IRS and you realize this is a pretty reasonable organization. And I spent so much money on tax attorneys, and that was like my mini MBA. In terms of like how to run a business, and that experience changed how I approach finances. It changed how I approached the IRS. It changed how I approached a lot of things. I'm very grateful for it. And I remember immediately shaking when I had the letter, like viscerally, like my hand was like tremoring. I was like, oh my God. And then calming down, and then that night having a conversation with Molly and being like, I'm so grateful for the IRS for like helping me get my life back together in terms of the financial realm. So yeah, and also my background as a poker player, like I was making a lot of money when I was like 21 or 22, and you think it's not going to go away. Yeah, I've made every mistake possible. That's how I learn. I learn from extremes. Like
you might be the first person to talk good about the IRS. So
they're just like any entrepreneur out there. Like accountants are good, tax attorneys are better. So the tax attorneys think in a strategic way, where accountants think in a checking off a box way. So an accountant will tell you have to do all these things. A tax attorney will tell you this is what happens when you don't do those things. Like here's the repercussions of those, and here's how we navigate that. And it was just a really good understanding. I remember like another healthy thing is like, for all you entrepreneurs out there, read, I think it's like 20 pages in the tax code about what you can write off. Read that. Because like a lot of people will like write, I'm like, you can't write, that's not a write-off. You can't do that. If you get audited, they're going to be like, why'd you do that? And there's just certain things like I feel like it's being honest. Also, I have a lot of things on tax, right? I don't view tax as a bad thing. I view the IRS as almost like a SaaS. Because think about it, like I'm paying amount of money per year to have infrastructure, to have the ability to call 911, to have safety while I'm walking down the streets. Like the exchange for all of those things for what it's worth is pretty great. And then like entrepreneurs, it's almost not fair the amount of things like I'll go to mastermind events that are with like friends that are a lot of money in nice places that are 100% no problem a write off. But it's a blend between like interest and the things that I'm interested in and in work and in business. And I think the real trick, I'm not giving tax advice here, but like I'm not a certified accountant or anything like that. But like, you have to have a narrative behind where you're spending money and why it's good for the business. And the truth is the narrative should be also for yourself and for the IRS. So for yourself, like, does this event really make sense for me to go to? Because it allows you to make better business decisions, in my opinion.
The one thing I wish is a tax write-off that I'm almost positive isn't are haircuts.
Yeah, no, I've had friends like, oh, I get my hair. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No. But then this is where it gets like weird. Like, I don't know if there's some influencer who does a whole series on haircuts
sure.
and records a whole footage of hair. Like, is that like, this is where it's becoming, I think the influencer thing is going to be an interesting, I wouldn't be surprised if tax code gets updated to account for that, but not anytime soon. They're a slow moving organization.
So as a business owner, do you have both an accountant and a tax attorney?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have I have a tax attorney who I map out and discuss higher arching strategies with, and then the accountant executes it. Wow. So the way I think about it is you're paying like a lot per hour, way more per hour for the attorney, but then they speak similar language, so they pass it down to the other person as well. And I also just always want to make sure that I go to sleep without any like, oh my God, I hope this doesn't, I don't get audited in 2024. Like, I'm good, come after me. They came after me, I was good. And I went through the audit process where they just like ask you like, what is this? And you have to justify what it was. Like, oh, here's the emails that correspond to why I was in this for this. Okay, then you don't hear from them for 3 months. And they're like, what's this? What's this? It's an inquiry into how you're spending your money and making sure it's for the business. Everybody fears it, but like, it's not really that. It's not as bad as, it's just this perception that it's bad. But they're reasonable. These are reasonable people. And if you're lying, they could find out. It's that simple. It's just not that complicated.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about skills. I love that statement. I heard a quote once, and it was, money monetizes once, but skills and relationships monetize forever. I think a lot about that. And I'd be curious as a young hustler, as you were, what were the skills that you developed then, and how do you use them now today?
I mean, first, like, just the creativity. There's just so many skills, like from marketing, which is all about understanding people and language, the skills for reframing your own experience, which I think is the weakest muscle in a lot of entrepreneurs, like not being able to reframe the journey and reframe what they're actually doing. So it's like the sort of like technical skills or mechanical skills of like how to grow and build a business and all that type of stuff. And then there's like the self-governing mindset, people skills that are required internally. But those skills look robust and they change depending on what your organization looks like. So like if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you're a solo entrepreneur in your internet marketing space, the skill set might look a lot different than if you're like, I always think about this, like if you have a 6-figure company versus a 7-figure versus 8, it's like completely different skill sets and completely different things that you need to learn and let go of. Like you're not going to run an 8-figure organization exercising control over everything. It's just not possible, right? And you're not going to run a 9-figure organization without having the skill set or the nuance of being able to manage people and motivate people and have a vision and all those other things. So it depends on where you want to go. And I think that's also like a downfall, is like some people try to make the transition but don't have the skill sets required to make the next transition. So now like a lot of entrepreneurs, like this notion of like leisurepreneur or the solopreneur kind of thing, which requires a certain set of skill sets, which is really like, how do you automate processes at a level where you don't need to deal with them, which, ChatGPT and AI and all this revolution has made it a hell of a lot easier. But also like one skill set I have is just like vetting people. I'm very good at that. And like on Upwork even, like I've spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands, maybe even $1 million or more on Upwork. And I found some amazing people, but there's like a process in it. And I think going back to an entrepreneur of like you execute a process and then you review and refine the process, and review and refine and review and refine. The best entrepreneurs I've seen have just treated that like a law. Like they've grown so much quicker than I, because they're just like, oh, problem solution, and they're just constantly iterating on their own process until it's really defined.
Are you familiar with Ray Dalio's principles?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I fall back on that, what you're talking about, of he calls it just another one of those. Is that every time he finds himself like spiraling down of like whatever, failed business, issue, family, whatever, he calls it just another one of those, because he knows that after that spiral down is like he shoots up afterwards. And every single time it's just like upward, 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 as he continues to have another one of those, as he calls it. I found that really interesting.
Yeah, no, I love I approach my life, I hope, from I think that principles are extracted, not stated. And what I mean by that is, like, a lot of people will say like, oh, these are my principles and these are my values. And it's like, really what you do is you look at the sum of someone's behaviors and you see their principles and values. It's not the other way around, right? So like, you could say it all you want, but the truth is it's just a measurement of the sum of your behaviors that show you like what you're interested in or what you're doing. It's interesting. Years ago, I coached like 7 people at Bridgewater at Ray Dalio's company.
Oh, damn.
So I know that culture pretty well.
Damn, that's actually wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have become very aware of, like, when I look at my calendar, I know for a God-given fact, because I'm pretty locked into, like, I pretty much live and die by that thing. And based on what I see is like the majority and the bulk of like a certain color, because everything's color coordinated, I know what I value pretty clearly.
Yeah, calendar. I mean, if you live your life out of a calendar, it's probably the best way of understanding where your priorities are and what you're doing, what you're not doing. I literally, before getting here, sent a message, because I don't know why, but my colors keep changing in Google Calendar. It's really frustrating, and I want to start color coding thing. Another thing I've done with the calendar is having like what was planned versus what actually happened. So, for example, like I wrote for like 90 minutes before I got here, and the goal was like 2,500 words, and I did 1,850 or something like that. And I write like social edge dash 1,850 words just to kind of see. And then like I'll update it with the reality. Like yesterday I did this. I said that I put like an hour block for something, and something else happened, and then I put the distraction inside the calendar. Because then you don't get a real representation of what you're doing. You just get this like fictional life that looks so ordered, but it's not like that. And then you could work towards making the adjustments. But just simple things, like I don't really have anything in my calendars. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday are always no work commitments, really.
I do the same thing. My calendar is like obsessively accurate more often than not. Like I'll go back and literally change times, what I did, who I was with, what the location was, because I frequently find myself looking back for multiple reasons, just to reflect, to learn something I had to look up, something I can't remember. I'm constantly going back in my calendar just to like refresh on certain topics. So I do the same thing. I'd like to go back to different skill sets that you mentioned from 6, 7, 8 figure. What would you consider be the skill sets for somebody trying to get to 6 figures?
I mean, 6 figures, probably get out of your own head. Like six figures is just all about action, right? Like I think what'll happen to most people, especially if you're transitioning from a traditional workspace environment, you'll try to get things perfect. You'll try to do the optimal thing, and you'll spend too much time prepping and not enough in actual action. If you look at the raw numbers, it's really not that hard to get to 6 figures. Second is being able to probably really narrow down on who you're serving. Not in a traditional avatar sense. I think that's just better for people. Like I'm working with people that are, I mean, in my poker company, we experienced the biggest breakthrough when I got fine-tuned on who I was marketing to. And it wasn't just poker players. It was like very sub-specific avatar of like, we're dealing with poker players over the age of 35 who play more than 20 hours a week and have tried multiple times but have failed at making this part-time or full-time income.
Oh, damn.
Like that, but that very specific change led to a 7-figure company where I couldn't break it before because it was too mass, and it made us very competitive in our space and a bunch of different things. So I would say like knowing who you're really serving, and then also just like I guess there's a difference between like small 6 figures and big 6 figures, but like let's say you're making $80K a year and you want to make $150K as an entrepreneur. You just got it's just actions. It's often just sticking with one thing until it works. And then it gets, cause yeah, people do, the order is, the truth is this, there is no order. That's why like, when you talk about like advice on the internet, and there's all these like successful people, it's like a big problem in our society. Like you see somebody take a certain path in life, and they learn lessons and insights from that path, and they share it like it's like gospel. And the truth is, like, I've made so many mistakes as an entrepreneur, especially earlier on, but I had a certain amount of skill sets that compensated for those mistakes. And it's like entrepreneurial advice, there are, I guess, some rules, but it's really more nuanced. It's really more a personal journey. And you got to want to go through that process or enjoy that process. And then also, like, a lot of entrepreneurs just like, I mean, I have it in me where I'm just like, I'm not going to stop, like, no matter what happened. Like, that's something that's important. Like, some people just question. It's going to be a lot of suffering if you just question every single step. So I think that, like, you know, you go out, you watch the videos, you go on YouTube, you get all that stuff. You don't treat anything as gospel, and you find your own path and you find your own journey. And a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they have that attitude of like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I have a faith in it. Like, I knew what I was doing up until, like, you know, until you realize you don't know what you're doing. And that's why coaches are so valuable, and having people and whatever you want to call it, mentors, consultants, coaches, friends, and people that are willing to give you the journey. But like, yeah, if you really look at everybody's journey, it's all different. It's not homogenized. It doesn't look the same. There's similar war stories and similar ups and downs, but there's many paths to the top of the mountain, and there's not just one true path.
Yeah. And I think if I had to wrap that in a bow, I would echo that statement too, of like sticking to a path and continuing to follow it, and recognizing that it's going to take much longer than you anticipated more often than not.
Yeah. And I didn't do that. So just for the record,
I
didn't really stick to a path. I went into so many different directions, and that's what I called myself. Somebody else called it, not me. But they said you're a tapas entrepreneur. And it was like, I try a bunch of different little things. And that's what I did. But that journey 10, 15 years ago is what allowed me to do the things that I'm doing today. It wasn't this meticulous path. What
were the stepping stones, or what were like the big moments where like you made bigger jumps in your journey, and what contributed to that?
The first big jump was Groupon and Living Social. So I went like viral. Remember when Groupon and Living Social were more, it's hard to, if you remember these days, like 15 years ago, if anybody's younger in this podcast, they probably wouldn't, but they were more special. So like in New York, there would be one deal a day. So all of a sudden this one class would get blasted to like 800,000 people. And I did the first deal for School of Cards, my first company on Living Social. And I was like, oh my God, like I did the math and I was like, I'm rich, like this is going to work. And like no one bought it. I was like, shit. But then this, for a nonverbal group, my class went like effectively viral in those times. So that was a big catalyst, because I had like 80 people in my office every day for a class, and it just filled the class. It was a really wonderful ability to, like, you're making money for getting somebody in the door. It was just great. I think that was the first big one. Second big one was moving to online courses and scaling. That was definitely a big transition. Third was just much bigger engagements with larger companies and organizations. And now the bigger transition is just like true scale. Like being able to deploy cohort-based programs that are insanely immersive and well-constructed. Because this is like the course that I'm making right now, or working on right now, is like my 38th or 39th course I've made.
Damn.
Yeah.
From going from in-person online, would you say did that make things easier or harder? The only reason I say that is because I think there is a degree of, when you go online, I mean, I guess it depends on when you're online, but when you go online, there's just like a lot of noise. And so it can be harder to cut through the noise. That's why I asked that question.
I think, you mean like from a marketing perspective? It can be hard to cut through the noise if you're like, it's going to sound fucked up, but like, if you don't have quality, yes. It's that simple. Like, if you don't have quality and you carbon copy what everybody else does, and you're not really caring about the customer experience and really caring about, so like a lot of people create courses and they make a course, they get their information out, but they don't really measure the impact of the course or how much it changed the actual person 3 months, 6 months, a year long later. And there's just like I don't know what the word is. It's like a laziness when it comes to course. Like, oh, I've had experience. Let me make a couple of videos. Like, I meticulously script every single word that I say. I spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours refining, changing, updating to getting a product that I want. And that's what leads to a very big business. And the reason why is most of my businesses have been made not on mass audience. So like where some people will sell like a $500 course and they try to get like 10,000 people or go for volume. I've always gone for deeper funnels. So like working with people that have I have people that have started with $1,000 course and have spent 80K, 90K, 100K with me because we keep delivering on what's there. And I think they understand my obsession with quality and improvement more so than like a lot of the courses I take online are just like really bad in my opinion. And I think all my courses are bad because I'm always trying to improve them. Right. But that's the difference. I'm not like, oh my God, it's great. Like, it's like, nope, there's can always be areas of improvement. We could always grow how we're saying this. We could always shift. And I've always been obsessed down that path. So I think we're quite innovative in how we do things compared to most online companies.
Yeah, it's good advice. As I continue to grow out this audience and I start to move towards that direction of offering a course like fucking everybody does these days, I feel like the approach that I'm really looking at it is from more like an Ivy League college, in that you vet and you actually make sure that the right people are in the classroom and that you guarantee results. Well, I shouldn't say guarantee. You drastically improve the odds that they do succeed, I guess you could say. And you track it and you stay connected with them and just making it more exclusive as opposed to just like trying to get as many people to buy it as possible. I feel like it's a better approach.
Yeah, in the beginning of phases, I vet every single person. So I talk to everybody. Yeah. And make sure I think they'll be a good fit, or 30-minute conversation or assessment-based vetting. We're big on assessment in my companies. I think first, people don't often know what they want. So you have to like give them an assessment to understand what they want. And then you got to be able to say like, you're good for this or you're not good for this. And I also, we can have a little 10-hour discussion about assessments and their roles in courses, but they're quite important. And also just some stuff that like, I just think that's just like cheesy that's out there. It's like, some people will, I don't know, just do the whole personal responsibility or personal accountability thing a little bit too much, in my opinion. So I have a different perspective on this. So I take the responsibility, not them. So people will like sign up for a program and they'll start off with like, okay, like, to get what you want after, you got to do all the work and da. And what they sometimes do is make the amount of work utterly ridiculous, right? And it's like, oh, but you didn't do all the work, like that kind of thing. I ask myself, it's like, why aren't they doing the work? Like, how could I change this content? How could I change this program to make it more efficient? I try to take more responsibility for the lack of performance in my courses instead of just throwing it on someone else. Like, no, this is my experience. Maybe they didn't go through an assessment. They should have went through an assessment. Maybe the promise of my course was just way too much and I'm not able to deliver on those type of things. Like, really, I feel like it's on the course creator more so than it is on the person, because otherwise it's just such a cop out. Like, oh, it's kind of like doing a fitness thing and be like, listen, I told you, like, eat these perfect macros and work out, strength train this and get 12K steps a day and sleep and do all that stuff. And then you come back and you're like, none of this is working. Why? Because it's not designed for my psychology, or because you're not working through my barriers, or because you're not, you know what I mean? And I think price is proportionate to the outcome. So like if you're charging somebody like $200 for a course, it's like, okay, just like an information exchange for the most part. But once you start get up there, like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 25,000, 50,000 for all these things, I believe that the promise should be delivered on in a more intimate way and setting.
How do you mentioned it earlier in terms of vetting people. You mentioned it through Upwork, but I'm sure you do that through hiring, social relationships as well. What are you looking for?
It depends on the program. So right now, I'm very big on labels. So I'm looking from my new program, Social Edge, is all about, it's a high-level social skills program. And when people go through it, if they identify as a label and aren't willing to put that aside, I don't let them in.
Like introvert, extrovert, or what?
As simple as that, right? So if somebody says like, nope, I'm introverted, I've tried all these things, it doesn't work anymore, I'll have a conversation about introversion and how I think it's like a blanketed statement that's used and doesn't really reflect the psychology and a lot of the research in a lot of ways that it's applied. And I'm like, all right, are you willing to give up? And some people are, you just can tell, or it's my perception, but I've been doing this for a long time, so I can know. I'm like, they might be a little bit problematic because I don't have the space to do the extra work to get them to overcome that. So I have like these like really in-depth exercises and experiences that people go through to look at the origin of their perspective and how they became the social person they are today and all this stuff. But if you're really holding on to I'm an introvert and I took, Myers-Briggs and this and that, and they're not willing to give that up, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of just say that, like, listen, or I'll just tell them, like, I've had people that have signed up for a program and they think that they're like a master of it. And I'm like, okay, why are you signing up for this program? Like you rated yourself like very high in this one area. I don't think you need this program, right? Because I don't like working with somebody. The scope of this program is not taking somebody from a 9.8 to a 10. There's no such thing, right? So labels, what else?
Just to touch on the label thing real quick.
Yeah.
I do find that one fascinating as well, especially like I've seen this with friends as well. And I think the introvert extrovert is a perfect example of this because I have many times had friends that are like, oh, I don't do that because I'm a introvert, extrovert, name your fucking thing. And it drives me nuts because people use it as like a trophy. And I was at South by Southwest and I was talking to Jim Quick and he said something and he said, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. And I was like, I know a lot of people that like hold on to whatever their thing is, whatever their label is, that like they hold on to it as if it's like, this is the end all be all and nothing you can tell me is otherwise. So yeah, I get that a lot.
Well, if those people heard that quote, they probably wouldn't see it as a limitation. They would see it as I am this.
Yeah.
You'd have to like do a little bit of back and forth to show that you're limiting yourself. I think labels are a really good way of understanding yourself. I think, and finding your people, there's a lot of pluses to them, but they become dangerous if you think you are a label. Like it's just some word that someone made up. And then most of the people don't really even understand the research or how this word came to be and what it actually means. Like I've had people that have told me that they're like introverted and I'm like, how do you know? And then they like, oh, I took a test online or somebody said something to them, right? Like those things have a really big impact. Like I have an entrepreneur right now that had a mentor. I won't call out the person's name, but they were an impressive person. And my client said that person said that, you're not a born leader. Whoa. And they put that in their head. Now, I don't even know if that's what they said. They could have said you need to work on your leadership skills, and they heard I'm not a born leader. And because of that, this person's been outsourcing like so many high-level leadership positions that I'm like, you're the CEO. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know any other CEO that doesn't do the activities that you're out. Like, this is kind of like borderline irresponsible, and it creates cultural issues and all that. And we started going back. And it was that statement that started to compound over years. And it's kind of like trauma. It's like an event happens, and trauma is thrown around a lot. My friend Alyssa says trauma with a lowercase t. But like an event happens and it changes the way you perceive the world, and then that compounds and compounds and compounds and compounds and compounds, and then you become that thing. And a lot of people don't realize. I mean, nobody does. You have to go back and look at what those patterns were to let them not have a hold on you.
I have a belief that I'd like to reflect onto you as somebody who spent a lot of time in psychology. And it is that I feel like so much of who we are today is shaped in those, like, we'll say, 5 to 10-year-old ages. Mm-hmm. And then we spend most of our life just like trying to like dissect what happened and why we think what we think. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. Like our whole perception is based on our past experiences. Our whole worldviews are based on, and they compound. That's 100%. I mean, I've had so many stories of like talking to someone and sort of getting at the source of why they are the way that they are. And it started off in early childhood. I think the age is really, so I do this exercise where I have everybody like lay out all the big moments in their life. like when they went to high school, like if there was a divorce, if there, like all the big moments first on a giant like timeline. And all you do is put the moments down first. You don't try to source any meaning. And then you look at each moment and sort of describe like what was going on for yourself. And then once you do that, once you detach yourself, you start to see like, oh yeah, that's when I did this and that's when I did that. Like a thing with my dad, I'll tell you, my dad passed away like 3 months ago from ALS, which was horrible to watch. But I told him this, and with my money issues, my friend Michael said to me, he was like, we usually like mimic or resist the patterns of our parents. And I was like, let me think about that. And I thought about this moment where my dad lost his job when I must have been like 10. And I remember feeling like anxiety in the house. Like they were joking about it, but there was like an anxiety. And my dad was at this dining room table with me. And I was like, what are we going to do? Like I said something like that. Like, and my dad with such confidence was like, oh, like I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. Like it's not ideal, but there's nothing to be worried about. And just like extreme confidence. And then I started looking at the pattern of my financial life, and it mimicked that. It was me making a ton of money, spending it all, getting into the bottom and trying to like climb my way out of it. And the truth is that's like mimicking the same confidence that my dad had in that moment. So like some of these things, sometimes you don't know how much weight to put in these things, right? Like people are like, oh, like what was your moment? And then humans are such a victim of like framing and perception that a moment could not have meant anything, but then you make it mean. But the truth is, like, if it gives you some cathartic release or it gives you the ability to understand yourself better, like, who cares if it's valid or not? Like, as long as it leads to some sort of application, it's just dangerous when you do that stuff at scale.
Totally.
Tell people to go back in their childhood. I mean, there's a bunch of things in psychology, like all the regressive hypnosis stuff and the research on eyewitness testimony. There's tons of examples of where this doesn't work to someone's advantage. It like hurts society or hurts an individual because you create this label.
Not only that, but like the ridiculous inaccuracy of like so much of what we think happened as well. Like I was just with a friend, and she was saying she lived out in DC for a while, where there's like tons of museums, right? And every time I go into a museum now, in my brain, I'm always like, there's no way this is accurate. Like 90% of this has to be just like speculation or what we think happened or what could have happened. Mm-hmm. And somebody wrote this story and somebody played the game of telephone and told it over the course of sometimes thousands of years. And so in my brain, I'm like, it's interesting. It's fun. It's cool. But at the same time, I'm like, there's no way. Like,
yeah, I had an amazing, I wish I remember her name, cultural anthropology professor that took us to the Natural History Museum in New York and called out all the cultural bias. And I left that museum like, oh my God. Uh-huh. And it's a narrative. It's someone recreating history. What's his name? Hardcore history. Dan Carlin is, like history's written by the victors, right? And historians are biased and people are biased, and you're always viewing things through somebody else's narrative. Mm-hmm. Which is why you have to get good at seeing when someone is in a narrative. I always wish there was like a news channel that was like just the facts. Like not this person did this or this, or just facts about what happened this week. Nobody would read it because we're obsessed with narrative and we love stories and we love all that. So unfortunately, I don't think that's a good idea.
I've actually heard, I don't know, somebody will have to fact check me, but I've heard like actually the best place to get, I don't follow any news. I'm completely disconnected for a myriad of reasons, which I think a lot of people would agree with these days. But I've heard that actually the best place to go is actually Wikipedia.
Really? I mean, Wikipedia is biased too though. Like I would not say the best place to go is Wikipedia. Like right now for news, I'm also not a big news person. I very rarely read it. I look for narrative. So when I'm reading something, I look for the position of the person. And sometimes people are just so embedded in trying to make an argument for something, I can't trust it. Because I could do that with anything. I could take any topic in psychology and reference all the things that support my thesis and just leave out all the things that don't. Like it's just so much nice. And I think there was some interesting research on the effectiveness of, I think, drug programs. I think it was like a study on DARE that found that when you teach kids,
they're more likely.
They're if it's like heavily biased, they're more likely to use the drug. If you just give them an honest, make your own choice thing, they were less likely to. I think it was DARE. I don't remember what it was, but I think we're getting smarter. Our access to information is much quicker, and you just can't really bullshit anymore. Like everybody's like a Google or a Chat GPT away from finding counter evidence, but people don't do
that. My favorite is sorry, Father, if you're listening to this, because I know you do. He watches the news, and it drives me nuts because, you know, it's mostly garbage. But the problem, why it drives me nuts, not because a lot of it's garbage, it's because he knows it's garbage, and he thinks that he's somehow above it. He thinks that if I watch it, I'm just educating. I know it's BS, but I'm going to watch it, and it's not going to affect me. When in reality, I would love to hear your opinion on this, especially with somebody who understands psychology, is that whether we like it to or not, I think it does affect us, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, it just like you're in some sort of echo chamber. Ideas and language, and I mean, it's just, it has to in some way, shape, or form. And also, just like I tell your dad, like, if you truly feel above something, and that's genuinely what you feel, it's incongruent to watch it. It doesn't make any sense. You're like wasting your time kind of thing, right? So it's like, and also just, I think everybody should be able to understand how to read a research paper. And when I mean how to read a research paper or how to read an academic study, not just the abstract to get what it is. Like to be able to look at an experimental design and understand the flaws, to look at the sampling methodology that they utilized and understanding where that doesn't work or not work. This is specifically relevant in the health industry, where things are cherry-picked left and right to support a claim. Like how many people are like, you know, this study, and it's like, there's a difference between a good study and a bad study. And some of these studies are just like exploratory in nature and not indicative of anything. And it's not like a 60,000 double-blind study on samples not done on da-da-da-da-da-da. I'll tell you this story. I had when I was in graduate school, my professor, this guy changed my life. I got to like reach out to him. I forgot his name. Oh, sorry.
You can tilt it down too if you need to. There you go.
So when I was in graduate school, I had this professor who was the head of data and analysis at the MTA. And I did this study. It was like my first experimental design. I was so excited about it. And like, I was like, research is pure and it's great. And I was like obsessed with this world. And I showed him I never forget, I showed him the data set in SPSS, which was like this old tool for statistical analysis. And he's like, what do you want to show? And I was like, what do you mean? I want to show what the data reflects. He's like, no, but like, what do you want? I was like, I want to show significance. Like, I want to show that this. He's like, all right. And like in 8 minutes, he like manipulated the data. And that was like a life shattering thing for me.
I remember that.
And also like psychology, not to bash it, but like it's a social science. It's not a hard science. There's a lot of bullshit, and there's a replication crisis, and there's studying people there's never percentages. It's people are unique, people are different. There's themes, there's trends, but there's not 86% of the time if you do this or 93% or like that's anytime you see a number associated with people, it's wrong. It's just that simple. It's a commentary on a theme that was based on a sample. So you got to really go and look at those things to understand it. And I just think we should be more, not make everything wrong, but just more curiously interested in how we're forming our opinions. Because sometimes like people just say things and they become part of your speech or vernacular and you're wrong.
I wish that was true for most people, but I don't think it is.
It's not.
It actually drives my girlfriend nuts because I question everything. And it almost to an obnoxious degree where like it can become annoying. Even if someone I know is like very well educated, way smarter on a topic than I am, I'll still question it just out of pure curiosity. And I rub a lot of people the wrong way from that, honestly. It's actually one of the reasons I don't work in healthcare anymore, because like I would question everything and then people would get their feelings hurt, I guess you would say, because like they think I'm questioning them as a person, not the actual idea, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't think most people would fall into that camp.
I feel like real expert, I hate that term. I feel like people that are really obsessive about a specific area, anytime that I've seen them go down that discourse, they like it. They don't get offended by it.
Yeah.
Because their ego is not held up in it. It's not like it's not me. It's like, well, it's actually a good point. There's a problem too. Like if you question everything, sometimes you can't actually get like results, right? Like at the end of the day, there's pretty much like basic tenets that work for the most part. And sometimes people spend too much time in that optimization process, and as a byproduct, they don't get to where you need to get to. I mean, I've been a victim of this so many times in my life.
As somebody who's what seems like a long-standing business owner, entrepreneur, and has always obviously had, for some psychological reason, obsessions with doing your own business, how did you become a teacher? How did you even get into academia? That seems interesting to me.
Well, really, I didn't want to. When I was in, the whole plan was to go to law school. I wanted to get a JD MBA and go into like mergers and acquisitions when I was like 18 or 19. So the reason why I started teaching was because I wanted to make my application look better for law school. So I was like, oh, it'd be cool to teach a couple classes. And then I taught and I loved it. And I kept teaching and teaching. I ended up teaching for like 6 years. And then I was gonna get a PhD. And then I kind of saw, I didn't like that route for myself. I wanted to fund my own stuff. I don't like red tape. And there was a lot of red tape in academic studies and research. I just want to do a study. I just didn't want to I want to pay for it myself. I don't want to have to like go through an IRB and do all these other things. I was just like, let's just do it. So I think that I got frustrated with that, and I just started to do my own research.
I almost went down the same path, actually. I have a master's in occupational therapy, and I literally applied, and I was basically accepted into the PhD program to be an OT and to teach and do research. And then around that time was when my divorce happened, and I decided to step back from it. And huge blessing to like not have gone down that path for the same reason. I mean, obviously I'm sure I would have created some narrative as to why academia is the best thing ever had I done it. But since I haven't done it, I'm very glad that I didn't, because I don't like the red tape. I do very poorly when I'm told what to do. I often do the opposite more often than not. So I can.
No, that's a good insight. Like whenever you're like, this isn't going to work for me, or like, I'm not going to do this. And I have tons of friends and colleagues and people that I work with that are, 4 PhDs and stuff like that. And some of them loved it. Some of them didn't love it. Some of them still love it. Some of them don't love it. The thing I loved about it was teaching. I really loved teaching. I miss teaching in person with students, like wide range of topics. I really enjoyed that.
You said you've done 30 some courses?
Like 30. I think this is my 38th. I think I tried to count because I taught like a bunch of classes. I taught like group dynamics, developmental psychology, general psychology.
Which course was the biggest home run and why?
Probably Beyond Tells, my poker course.
Okay.
Just put me on the map, the highest level poker players.
On that topic, I know you seem to have an anti-body language approach, but more of a nonverbal approach. Is that accurate?
I just don't like the word body language. Body language came from a book by Julian First in the 1960s that on the cover it says how to tell if she's a loose woman or not. That's all I need to say. Like, it's just a word that becomes part of our cultural narrative. That's like, the book is like laughable when you read the qualities of it. The reason why I don't like body language is associated with so much X means Y language, which essentially is like, oh, well, if somebody rolls their shoulders or they're sitting like that, they're not confident. And a lot of what you see if like go on YouTube and you look at like a body language expert, they're just taking their own narrative and using behavior. It's almost like poetry, like spinning some convenient thing and then citing studies that they've never read and citing like 93% of communication is not nonverbal. It's complete nonsense. And you know how many people start off presentations with that? 93% of communication. How does that even make sense? Like, how would you design a study that would show that 93% of communication, like what? But everybody needs a reference and everybody needs a quote and everybody needs the truth is there's just themes of perception. There's like patterns of perception in different parts of the world and wherever you're at. And I'm more interested in understanding the themes of perception as opposed to some sort of truth. Like, and there isn't. Like, I've talked to people that don't speak confidently and are confident. They just don't have the patterns that society associates with confidence.
What would those themes of perception be then, if you were to describe that to somebody?
What do you mean exactly? Like,
it's like, so I guess even define what that means in terms of, let's start there. Like, what is...
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so like, for example, if I were to take 6 audio samples of 6 people making a statement, and I were to ask 1,000 people in the tri-state area of America, who's the most confident, you'd probably have an overlap. You'd be like, wow, 94% of the people think it's person A. No one thinks it's person, E. and there's some dispute between B and C. Like, that's what I mean. There's like these definitely perceptual themes, which is what good acting is, right? A good actor gets up and nails a perceptual societal theme, so you actually believe that that person lost their father in a car accident when they were 14 years old. I mean, but it's perception, not so much meaning.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's layers and layers of nuance between that, from social norms to where you're from, or if you have an accent, or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, most behavior is a reaction to invisible social norms. So it's like you have to be able to read the context that it exists in before you read the behavior. That's where most people, like, you can't just look at someone. You gotta look at someone and think about all the invisible things that surround the environment or the culture.
It's like reading code.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's way, way, way more complex than anybody ever realizes. And the fact that we do it is what makes humans so cool. Like the fact that a podcast has norms, or this has norms, all like that you can absorb it. It's just so fascinating to me.
I've tried to explain that to clients of mine, honestly, from a marketing standpoint, because it's not only in person, it's also digital, right? It's like, depending upon what platform you're on, from TikTok to Instagram to LinkedIn to what website you're on, from Reddit to whatever, name your website, is like, it's the same thing. There's a certain frame of mind that happens when you're on that platform. It's honestly one of the reasons I've never gravitated towards TikTok, is I feel like the social norm of TikTok is just not my audience at the end of the day. And I think people forget that. I think they just want to be everywhere and attract everything.
Yeah, I mean, the social platforms are interesting. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at this. Some people would make the argument of just like, go full exposure, be on every platform. However, optimize a little bit for the relevancy of that platform. So like, you're probably not going to do well if you take the same piece of content and post it across every single platform. It's just not. Like LinkedIn, it needs to be modified. But if you like take the same piece of content and frame it differently for LinkedIn than you do for TikTok versus YouTube versus whatever, it'll probably have like a higher efficacy or higher working. So the thing that I hate is, like, I love nuance. So as my podcast is going to be called Masters of Nuance in 2025, having like 3-hour nuance conversations about certain topics. And I feel like social is optimizing for cutting out the nuance and optimizing for the quick tip or the quick thing or the quick. And it's hard. It's hard to do that. That's why I'm going to go pretty hard on social in the next like 3 months. I'll be everywhere. But every clip is part of a more nuanced discussion. So it's a cut out of a 3-hour thing. So I could be like, listen, if you want to explore this more, go to this YouTube video. Go to this YouTube video. And I mean, the truth is I still think YouTube's the best platform. And the reason why it's archival, where like Instagram, you post something, it goes viral, and then it's going to kind of be gone after a certain amount of time. But YouTube, it's effectively a search engine in a lot of ways. And it's just, I mean, I have videos that I made like 14 years ago on YouTube that still make me money today. It's like, really? So like, can't say that about Instagram.
What is the obsession with nuance?
I just find it to be more interesting. I find that life and humans is complex. And yeah, there are rules and there are things that work. But I don't know, just like most people, I feel like why I'm so interested in it is because I feel like our society is pulling away from it. And I feel like you need people that are going to champion the nuance of areas as opposed to like quick. And I feel like the nuance group is not winning, right? Like there's these people that are out there that have, that's why my podcast is going to be like, every once in a while, it'll be like a famous person, a thought leader. Not everyone, because if I don't think that they're like a master of nuance, they're not on it, right? But I also want to put, like, there's one person that I want to invite that was like homeless for 10 years, and then like was a lawyer, and then was like a policy person. There's like 30 years of experience in the world of home. And like, I always ask myself, like I live downtown Austin, I look around, I'm like, why can't they solve? It's like, there's probably some nuance behind that I don't understand.
Definitely.
Because this seems like a simple problem. It's not. There's mental health issues. It's a very in-depth thing. And I feel like there's more empathy. There's more understanding of others. There's more respect when you understand the nuance of things as opposed to viewing the world black and white. And it's not. It's shades of gray. And I think our world could benefit more from that. And I kind of want to be a stand for that. Like, I feel like my work is about the nuance of people, but there's a bunch of nuance and so many other topics that I want to explore more.
I like that. I've said the same thing, just in different words. Like, I just like the idea of there is a depth to things that we never will understand. But that's true for everything, from this table to this can to everything in our environment or in our lives, especially relationships, is that, yes, they're far deeper than what you think you know about it. And that's always true the second you try to like I'm making sourdough bread, and like, you would think it's the easiest thing on the planet.
It's not.
But there is a depth and a nuance to it that is far beyond my reckoning. So I agree with that a lot.
And that's like what mastery is. I think like mastery is the pursuit of nuance, right? Like
it's like those sushi makers in Japan, right?
It's like it's sushi. Japanese has a very, their culture is like that. Their culture is very, somebody will, simple job like cleaning or something, and they'll look at it differently than we do here.
Yeah, we try to do it all here, don't we?
Yeah, America's interesting.
Yeah. I know, because you did, 3 years of just like nonstop travel, Asia, Europe, America?
Traveled a lot, yeah. It was an eye-opening experience just to see how people like live their lives and how different things are. I mean, I think it's also just an eye-opening experience traveling around America.
Sounds exhausting.
Born and raised in New York City, like you're taught that like the rest of the country sucks and like it's New York or nowhere. And then you go to other places and you're like, I don't know, people seem happier outside of New York than they do in New York, and then you start to changes your worldview and changes your experience of people. And
they're like, you guys are really stressed out over there. Like, you guys need to calm down. I felt that when I went to my buddy's wedding recently, and it was Amalfi Coast in Italy. And I remember multiple nights where I was just like walking through the town, and all the people that obviously live there were very casually hanging out on the benches and having conversations, and didn't feel like they needed to be anywhere, and just like enjoying life, I guess you could say. It was
and it's also like, that is not my version of enjoying life, right? Like, that's what life is. It's just your own, whatever you want. Like, don't let anybody tell you like what it is. Like, we're gonna die. We're all going to be dead. Nobody's going to remember anybody. I don't care how famous or whatever someone is. Like 400 or 500 years from now, like Steve Jobs is not going to be brought up.
No.
Like they spearheaded a movement. They did all these incredible things. But so it's like, what are you genuinely chasing? Like, and you got to enjoy the process, right? Because like there's just like, get to the destination and you're like, okay, now what? Like, so enjoy the process, and your life is what you want to make. Like, I want to be, for whatever reason, it's this nuance of people and reading behavior and complex social skills. Like, that's what I want. That's what it lights me up the most. I have really no idea why. I mean, maybe it was because I was anxious or whatever, but like, now I'm good at it, and now like I've had a lot of experience with it, or blah blah blah. I don't fucking know. Like, but it's something that I really passionately believe in, and it's something that I want to do, which makes it a lot less. It makes it effortless. It's kind of like, I have friends like that. Like, I have a friend that's like an endurance runner, but like he runs. I'll send this to him. Like, my friend Jack runs because he needs to run, not because he wants to run. He like needs to. Like, he is such an ADHD all over the place, not to use labels, but on that spectrum, that he literally tires himself out every morning for 2 hours so he can go about his day. And it's like, he doesn't know how to act without running, right? And I mean, I've ran ultra events and I've trained for them and all that. And it's like, it wasn't that for me. For me, running was doing what you say you will do, push your mind, push your body, it was a different theme. We both ran, but the reason why we did it is so different. And people often copy the outcomes of what someone's doing, but don't really copy the why someone's doing it, right? And that could lead you down a path that's not yours.
I often think I'm like the human version of an Australian Shepherd. I just have like a certain amount of energy that I need to get out basically every single day. Otherwise, I'm just anxious.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they are. My sister has a mini Aussie, and they're like, it's so interesting too that like how herding's in their DNA. So when we go like walk with them, she's always like left, right, looking back, left, right, and like keeping us in a circle. It's like so cool. No, some people have that. Like I envy people that have that sometimes. I'm more of I get my energy from people more than anything else. So if I'm tired and I'm put in a room full of people, it's like instant energy for me. It's like, I'm I'm a classic extrovert, as one would say from that definition.
I'm actually shocked by that statement. I was just recently out in Denver with a buddy, and he is for sure, not to give labels, but a 10 out of 10 extrovert, because I've had conversations with him about this, because he has people at his place all the time. He's always like working out in the sauna, doing cold plunges, has people over, multiple people stay and live there, and people are always visiting and in and out, and he loves it, right? And I'm like, do you ever burn out, man? He's like, you know what? As long as I get like 30 minutes alone a day, he's like, I'm usually pretty good. And I like reflected on that, and I was like, I'm actually the opposite. Like about an hour of people a day, and I'm good. Like I'm super happy if that's like the max of what I spend in a day.
This sounds like, is it Mike Brown, your friend?
Eric Hinman?
No.
But
it sounds like a little bit like Mike, another Denver person.
Yeah.
Just some people have that. And then like, some people have like some sort of punishment thing or self-worth thing. Like I've met some like crazy endurance where like some of those people are just like, they got skeletons or they got something they're running from, right?
Most
like,
of them do.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how there's that theme.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like what compels me to write every day? What compels me to do all these things? It's cool. It's like, and I don't think there's that as many answers. You can look for answers. You're not going to really know, because you're not going to really know the balance of your genetic disposition, the early childhood memories, how your brain is structured in a way that makes certain things easy and certain things not. Like it's so complex that you're not going to know, but you can take guesses, and I think it's useful to go on that inquiry of why you are the person that you are, as long as you're happy. And as long as you're going in the right direction.
I actually recently just connected with an endurance athlete. His name's Robbie. Shout out to him. I'll probably send him this episode as well. But he outran a Tesla. There's actually a great YouTube video on it. So they ran a Tesla as far as it could go, and I think it went 242 miles. Jesus. And so he ran 242 miles. And fascinating guy. He was actually one of the most fun conversations that I had. But he very much so like coined the fact that he's like, yeah, most of the endurance athletes that I know, like substance abuse.
Yeah. Oh.
Or like.
So I have a joke about that substance abuse thing. So like I was running with my friend Steven, and I was like, don't tap into that addict mindset. and he started laughing.
Yeah.
And I was like, while we're running, do not do that addict mindset. Like I've known some really successful, super interesting people that had crazy substance use abuse.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like carrying over that abuse to something else, right? But just more healthy in society's definition or view or something like that. Yeah, I'm not that. I ran like a 24-hour ultra event.
Whew.
And I did the Spartan Ultra Championship in Telluride. But I trained for it, and it was a great lesson for me, but I don't want to do that again. I don't know how healthy it is.
Yeah. I agree, man. I'm I guess lucky that I was raised in a pretty healthy environment, and I don't have a lot of skeletons and demons. Mm-hmm. And so like I just did the Austin half marathon this past weekend.
I was watching them run.
Yeah.
They messed up my traffic on Sunday.
You're welcome.
Trying to get to dinner. It was crazy.
Yeah. I think there was 19,000 people or something, but like, yeah, I actually, even after doing that, like it was fun, great experience. It was my second half marathon, but I honestly like don't have a lot of interest in doing like an ultra or even a full marathon. Is like, I don't hate myself enough, I guess. I don't know. Like,
well, I mean, there's so many different paths to it, right? Like, first of all, I respect anybody that has their life dialed in to the point of where they can train that much. It's like, it's a lot of road time and getting on a bike, and like, it's hard to do that. So it's just like my friend Dan Martell, I don't know, sometimes I'm just like, what's wrong with this guy? Like, how does he do it? Cause he like runs like 50 companies. He's like, he does everything, Dan. And somehow he's finding like the time but that's his pull in life. Like that's what he likes. And he's a champion of that. And actually watching Dan on Instagram is the thing that made me do the ultra event. Like I'm like, how's this guy? He got 2 kids, a wife, a family, this. I'm like a home alone. Fuck it, I'm gonna do this. But I know I'm obsessive, so I'm careful because I'm like, I got into it and I got really into it. And that's all I'm doing is like reading and like training and like all that stuff. So, everybody has their own pursuit. But then it's just also like Iron Cowboy. Like no matter who you are, that guy is just like, it's like being in a room, like, marathon runners are like, oh, I ran a marathon. And then ultra runners are like, well, I run ultra events. And then fucking Iron Cowboy comes along and it's like, oh, I won every single day.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
I love that obsessive behavior though, man. I can resonate with that a lot. Actually, my girlfriend's been trying to get me into pickleball. And I keep telling her, as like, although it would be a fun activity, I have a personality type that I know if I'm going to do something, I'm going to fucking do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to do that yet.
Yeah, not with pickleballs. It's fun.
Yeah, I'm sure, for sure. I just know my personality enough that I'm doing other things that I'm obsessed with enough at this point that I'm not ready to like, and I don't know why I have this like all or nothing mentality, but I definitely have that.
I have a similar thing. My friend Claire once said to me, you need to do things just for the sake of doing them. Because the entrepreneurial thing always, like I'll be making a puzzle and be like, I should make a puzzle company. You know what I mean? Like dude. It just always turns into something, or like, dude, I should be the best at this in the world. It's just like, just do it for the sake of doing it.
We went to the UT basketball game last night. She got free tickets. We're like, fuck it. And the whole time I was there, dude, it's so funny. Even like as we were like walking into the stadium, there's all the e-bike people that like ride people around. And I'm like watching these people and she sees me just like inquisitively like staring at this like bike. And she's like, what? And I was like, I wonder like what the overhead is on this and like how much they make. And I was like, they have like sponsors on the e-bike. So like, do they get kickback from that? And she's like, stop. Yeah. I was like,
it's like a perspective, right? It's like an entrepreneurial will see opportunity in the world and be curious about how certain things are running, or something. An artist might see beauty in the world and like just might look at, like I have friends that are artists who just like sit there and just like look out the window for like 6 minutes. I'm like, you all right? And they're like, yeah, just like, isn't the sky like beautiful? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a
sky. It's just everybody views it through different ways. Like somebody that's really interested in my friend Emily Kierbird, she's a chiropractor, like ran this company called Urban Wellness in New York, who was incredible. And like when she sees posture and people's bodies, she sees their pain and what's causing it and what's all these things. So I think that's what's cool about humans. We all have that unique perspective and sharing it is cool.
Which leads me to a question I wanted to cover here before we start to wrap things up. I always like to bring up what somebody's, if they were to give a masterclass or a one-on-one, which obviously you literally have, I'd be curious as to what that would be for you and what maybe we could teach others. Would you say it would be more the nonverbal stuff, or what would you say?
Yeah, I think the two areas that I could is like definitely the behavioral aspect of poker. I mean, that's what I spent 10 years of my life on.
Specifically poker. Yeah,
I'm known as like the expert in teaching high-level poker players how to read other high-level poker players.
Is there carryover to everybody else though, or no?
There's some themes, but it's like an individual. Like I do opposition research on the biggest games in poker and like analyze players and build databases, and like that's what I did the largest study ever conducted on poker players. That was like my like core focus. I would say that, and then things around reading behavior. Reading behavior and just any aspect like behavioral optimization and social skills. We have a very different approach to it, more customized, more about a person, not that there's like rights or wrongs or this or that. And I think I spent a lot of time doing that. Like now that I'm thinking about it, like I'm 38, I started when I was 22, so 16 years.
Damn.
And I won't stop. So like it's something that I'm going to continue doing every year.
So obviously there's going to be nuance, to use your words, in all of that. But is there patterns? Are there things?
Oh, for sure. Like there are for sure patterns in people. As long as you're coming from a place of not like you're knowing versus noticing, or not, or maybe a better distinction is looking instead of noticing. If you look for something, you'll find it. So if you're like looking for signs of deception, you'll see them when they're not there. And that's what people do. They don't realize that they're looking at behavior through a unique narrative where they're trying to build evidence for whatever they want to see. So if you think your husband's cheating on you or your wife's cheating on you, and you look for evidence, you're going to find it. They're going to check their phone weird in a way or whatever. And you first have to be really aware of your own defaults of how you're looking at the world. That's why the process is getting rid of your defaults first. and just noticing them, like noticing when, or if you're a people pleaser kind of person, you think someone's mad at you or someone doesn't like you, you're going to see signs that people don't like you way more than someone that doesn't. So the skill set's first, a lot of self-work and noticing where your perception errors are, and then learning how to not see people for meaning, but just see behavior, like, which is nuanced, really nuanced. Like, so a smile is not real or fake. It's like silly classification. But there are smile timing that are a little bit slower. The morphology is different. And when someone's a little bit uncomfortable, you see something that mimics that sort of smile timing. Right? Like I can envision a smile of somebody who's socially anxious in a setting and smiling based on the speed of it, timing of it, shape of it. Like, that's a theme. And it's a theme because it gives off, I don't know for a fact that you're anxious, but it allows me to start this inquiry of like, interesting, like, I don't know, this person seems a little bit off. So let me go over there and try to compensate and see what I can do to make them feel better, even if I'm wrong. So we're always compensating in social interactions. I have this thing that's like, I just wrote this. A major contradiction of one of my programs is, I know saying this program is about reading behavior, but you could never truly read any behavior. You're just predicting what you think something is. And there's people that have better predictions than others. And usually the people that are like, I'm really good at this skill set, they're not that great. They have an overconfidence in terms of what's going on. Like, you got to be humble enough to know that, like, I spent my life watching videos of people and getting feedback loops, and this is what I do. And there's times where I look, I don't know, the person's, what do you want me to say? They seem fine. Like, what do you want me to do? But I'm really good at pulling out, like, I can watch someone and tell you the social problems that they have, because that's what that pattern formation is. So I'll know, like, all right, this person is coming across as too confident, too arrogant, is not liked by their team. This person is not, I can see those themes that I've seen in society.
Do you ever recommend people to like literally just like film a conversation that they're having with somebody?
That's what we do all the time. We film conversations of them, and then our software breaks them down.
Yeah. But I mean, if somebody like just wanted to do it on their own, I mean, like,
that's my favorite. That's like one of my top recommended things. Like, record a video of you talking to like a very close friend or somebody you feel really comfortable with. That's usually the basis for your best style of communication.
And then just watch it and just see what you do.
See what you do, and then you look to mimic that. It's really cool. So like, if I told you to right now, I'm like, all right, smile like you really enjoy what I said and you're interested. You won't be able, most people can't nail it, like what they truly look like when they're interested. They're like, is this good? But then they laugh and smile, and you're like, yeah, they time it. So having an awareness of what you look like when you're the most comfortable is a better basis to operate from, as opposed to what you think society thinks that you should be.
Damn.
Right? As opposed to like, you see salespeople with this, like these overly energetic salespeople, like, hey man, how are you? So nice to meet you. And they think that's what sales is. But I've seen like salespeople that are assholes that have the highest conversion rate over everyone else because of their reactivity and a bunch of other different dynamics. And most people don't know what the most effective version of themselves is, because they just haven't done the work, or they've gotten bad feedback, or they've been told this or told that. Or the truth is, it's usually when you're most comfortable, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal advice. I can't help but already feel like watching game film is very painful, right? I mean, that's what you're doing.
You get over it though.
Yeah.
I had a conversation in my program. We have like analytics, and we're seeing that people aren't watching their videos. So I had to have like a 20-minute discussion about this. I'm like, listen, I know that it's painful. I know it's the last thing that you want to do, but I'm going to give you a little secret. Part of the mechanism of the experience is just watching yourself. So there's an acceptance that comes from the more and more that you watch yourself. Like, the more and more you watch yourself over and over and over and over again, the things that you don't like, they become less. They don't mean that much to you, because you start to see like how it is actually silly, and how like nobody really cares about you. They care about themselves. So it's just, and also people just look at weird, like I'll look at myself and I'll be like, damn, I need to work out more, or I've gained weight or whatever. But like the most critique version I am of myself is like when I'm not myself. Like, I like it when I'm fully me. I call it like fully aligned. And I can tell when I'm not. Like, all right, like what was going on for me? I seem a little bit off. Other people can't. I can. But it's just like a higher level of self-awareness of like, when you're your best version of yourself. And your best version of yourself is not always dependent on those around you. There's a great quote. I hate that he said this. I quote it so often, but Bill Cosby, the great Bill Cosby. once said, I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everyone.
Oh,
and
facts.
It's so true. Or the key to failure is drugging everyone.
Well, that's phenomenal advice. I can admittedly say that I've definitely become a much better speaker and communicator since doing the podcast show and like watching, and it's painful though for a while, but you're right. I think you do get over it. But you've definitely encouraged me to do it more often than I probably should or do, I guess you could say. Cause like I'll rewatch it for sure at least once, but not like multiple times with like the intention of improving, I guess you could say.
But that's where it gets tricky. So
Right.
What are you trying to improve for? So like, is it the intention of improving, I don't know, like comfort for the audience? Is it the depth of your questions? Is it like you can't just you will never be able to watch a video from a perspective of general improvement. You have to get specific and you have to say like, oh, like maybe. So for me, one of the things that I did not do on this podcast is like, as I do more podcasts, I have a very bounce around brain. So I can go to like topic to topic. So I'll sometimes not finish something. So like there's 3 instances in this podcast where I didn't finish fully what I was trying to say. And I remember each one of them. And I was like, okay, I can work that. The last podcast I did had like 9. So, okay, 9 to 3. That's a decrease. So you just got to get a little bit more specific with yourself, or else you just can just like judge and make wrong everything. And also you got to choose the things that make sense. So a lot of people will choose like vocal fillers and ums and ahs and all these different things, which are good to reduce. But at the end of the day, it's about, I truly believe it's how you want the other person to feel, and it's how you want the conversation to go. And that could be the answer. Did the conversation go where I wanted to go? Or you could say, did I get 6 nuggets that can be used for social media? What's the better way I could engineer the 6 nuggets, right? Like, but you got to get specific. If you just say like, oh, let me improve, you're just going to, I don't know. I don't like the way I did this. I don't like the way I did that. Maybe I should do this. So, and it's also what's going to move the needle for you.
Right. Were the 9 the Shane Parrish episode?
Yeah. Yeah. It was that one.
That was a great conversation. I love
it was great conversation. I love Shane. I just found myself, somebody put it in the comments and I was like, yeah, I remember myself doing that. Like, cause I get excited and then I just jump, right? But I was like, I didn't really flesh out that thought. I went and I just like changed. And also we had like more of a tapas conversation too. So we didn't go down, we went like a bunch of different areas, which was great. But, and that's all how I want. Like, I never want to leave somebody. I guess that's the distinction. Like, I think the feedback is not, that wasn't for me. It wasn't how I want Blake to look. That feedback was for the people listening. I don't want somebody really enjoying what I'm saying, and then all of a sudden I just end the conversation. It's like reading a book and you don't have the last chapter. Like, that sucks. I don't want to create that. So like, how could I be more conscious of it, right? And then what I'll do is like for the next like 3 podcasts I go on, I'll like put in the calendar or whatever, maybe write a note, like 1, make sure you finish your statements, 2, make sure you do this, 3, make sure, and just keep those top of mind until I feel like they're no longer a thing, and then add more, and then add more, and then add more.
Do you happen to know Derek Sivers?
That sounds very familiar. 5660 or whatever, 67 signals?
Yes. No.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. No.
The guy who predicted the election?
CD Baby?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Maybe not. Maybe we're talking about this different person. Anyways, only reason I brought that up is because, as mentioned, Shane Parrish briefly, and that was the first time I found his podcast show, The Knowledge Project, was because Derek Sivers was on it. I'm a huge fan of Derek Sivers. If you've never heard of him, most people haven't. He's kind of like this hidden, I don't know. I love the way his brain works, I guess you could say.
What does he do? What is his?
He originally made his wealth on a company called CD Baby. He was like one of the OGs of like burning CDs and selling them for people. But then he's written multiple books and he's been on a few podcast shows. He's pretty close with Tim Ferris. But I just really like the way his brain works. Like literally to the point where his website is literally like the most basically text document looking website you've ever seen in your life. Those. Yeah. Because he just likes to remove the nuance, I guess you could say. It's like just make things basic and simple is like his philosophy to life.
Yeah. I mean, there's also, I think Tim Ferris is somebody who does this extremely well. Tim is really good at somehow bouncing back and forth between tactics and nuance. And I think the reason why Tim Ferris is so good at tactics is because he is so dedicated to nuance. He goes down the nuance to extract the tactics, where a lot of people do the other way around. They just throw out the tactics without understanding the nuance. And he's always been phenomenal at that, of just like, I mean, that guy was so ahead of his time. Like, people don't really realize that, like, with little things like blood glucose monitors. Like, Tim Ferris wrote a blog post and did a thing about that like 16 years ago or something like that. I was like a qualifier for Molly. So I met Molly in one of my first body language classes, right? And this is before Tim Ferris was kind of like the Tim Ferris he is now. Like, still kind of famous, but not really, only in certain circles. And, this hot girl walks in, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then, like, I don't know, maybe like 60 minutes into the class, like, I had the 4-hour body on my thing, and she's like, and she brought up Tim Ferris, and I was like, you know Tim Ferris is? Like, that's odd. Like, I wouldn't expect that. And she's like, of course. I can't wait for the 4-hour body to come out. And and I was like, oh, you're cool. And it was like something that like bound us together. It was like pretty cool. And then we share so many interests.
Molly is Blake's wife, for the record, if anyone
Molly's
doesn't know.
Blake's wife.
Yeah. I have a round of rapid fire questions for you. So it's whatever the first thing is that comes to mind.
Okay.
What's your best business advice?
That's a good question. I enjoy it. Life is way too short. Make sure you frame the situation, create the dynamic. You are creating something in the world. Be proud of yourself. Enjoy it.
What's your best marketing advice?
Understand the bell curve distribution of your competition. So, like, basically, if you could think of life as on a bell curve, understand what's average in your industry and then try to do something that's exceptional.
Damn, I have never heard that. That's great. What's your favorite part about entrepreneurship?
It's 100% my responsibility, 100% my own destiny. Everything's my fault. I love that.
Everything's my fault. I like the way you frame that.
Yeah.
When are you most productive?
When I'm excited and like feel really like passionate about something, I am. But the truth is productivity is, I think, a trained muscle. No app in the world. Like, it's something that you build and develop.
Who is your inspiration?
I've never been one of those people that's like, I have a mentor or anything. I think my inspiration comes from so many sources. It could just be something somebody says or a podcast episode, but I don't like attach it to one person per se. I find people in general all have the capacity to be. I've been inspired by homeless people. Like, so I don't like idolize or have any like, oh my God, that person's great. I think everybody's got their good and everybody's got their bad, and I choose to be inspired by unique aspects of people.
I agree, man. I feel the same way. Tell me one secret or something most people don't know about you.
I was on Broadway when I was younger. It's just a weird thing that I don't really bring up, but yeah, that was with Diana Rigg.
No kidding. How long?
For 3 months. It was just a 3-month show, but she won the Tony for it. It was a really cool experience.
Damn. What would you change about yourself?
I would, this is such a weird one. I would change my genetic structure and maybe like metabolic system so that I can burn fat more efficiently, because this is getting ridiculous. That's exactly what I would change.
Never have I had that response.
Yeah.
What's your favorite app or resource right now?
Ooh. My favorite app or resource. I think it's hard because it's like, what's my favorite for you listening, or what's like actually like, what do I use the most? You know what I mean? I really think it's the calendar.
Google? Apple?
Google. It's Google. Google's the infrastructure with Fantastical as the usability layer of like how I add it. Fantastical is like a Mac-based app. And there's also another one, AMIE, AMIE, that's pretty decent, but I like Fantastical more right now.
Are you running away from something or towards something?
That's a great question. I am definitely running towards something right now, but I think this is fairly recent. Like, maybe, I think COVID was a transition for me. So I think prior to COVID, I was running away, and now I'm running too.
That's good, man. I'm glad to hear that. What's your favorite part about Austin? And you can't say the people.
The location of it. So I have to be often in New York and California, and Vegas. It's really cool being in center of the United States. And it's like, I got to Vegas in 2.5 hours. I get to New York in 3.5 hours. Like, it's really nice being centrally located, especially with the time zone switch. But I would have probably said to people like everybody does.
I know. That's why I stopped letting people.
I'll talk shit about Austin. The one thing about Austin I don't like is not pretty. I find Austin not pretty. Like, it's just flat, and there's like no beautiful mountains, and there's no, like, it's nice walking around Lady Bird Lake and stuff like that. But I'm like, in Vegas, you got these incredible mountains everywhere. In California, you got this incredible beach. In New York, you have this like incredible buildings. If you like that or don't like that, I feel like Austin's like, I don't know.
Why'd you pick Austin over Denver then? Denver's in the center.
So I probably would have moved.
Is that a loaded question?
It's a loaded question. I probably would have moved to Denver. But I don't know. It's like one of our agreements was like to be below some 33rd parallel for sunlight or something, Molly. The circadian optimal wife.
Blake's wife is a sleep expert, if you didn't know.
Yeah, and she was like, no. I mean, I only was in Austin for 24 hours before I moved here.
What?
Yeah, I just came here. I was like, okay, let's go to Austin.
This is it.
That's it. Let's get an apartment. Let's find, because I have more friends. I have a lot of friends here now. And everybody was just like, oh, Austin, Austin, Austin. So I was like, okay, let's go. It's that simple.
Wild. I have one last question. Before I ask that question, though, I want to acknowledge you, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're doing a lot of good with the behavioral stuff, from obviously being a teacher as a psychologist, from following your entrepreneurship journey and helping people all over the world, obviously, and traveling and speaking and serving a lot of people in that realm. And yeah, man, I just want to acknowledge that.
And also, I'll acknowledge you for this podcast. Actually, no, I'm not going to acknowledge you because it's too reciprocal instant. But I will acknowledge you for the insight you just had me, because I haven't had somebody say that word to me in a long time. And I just got an interesting insight that I have to share because it came up. When I was running from something, I didn't like acknowledgement. When people acknowledged me, I felt like, okay, like it was like an uncomfortable type of thing. And now I felt like fine with it and like gratitude and and I think it's because of your framing of running from and running to. So now that I'm running to, it's not like, I guess I didn't feel like I deserved to be acknowledged, or totally. I didn't feel like or I'm not good enough to be acknowledged. What are you talking about, right? So I thought that was interesting that it came up.
I think most business owners don't feel worthy.
Oh yeah, that's like everybody. I don't have that problem now. I've always been confident. I've never had like imposter syndrome or any of those type of things, but like it shows up differently for me. So I don't have Blake's the problem. It's my work. So like I'm never satisfied. Like there's clues in this podcast. Like I'm never satisfied with the content. I'm always improving it. It's a dissociation for me, but it's my creation. And I know that because I always thought that like if I did something else, I'd be way richer. So if I didn't do something under Blake Eastman or under the Nonverbal Group thing I created, because I've helped friends, and they're like, what the hell, man? Like, you're so quick. And I'm like, yeah, because there's not that resistance about who I am, who it is. But the truth is, I think when you really start to serve others, like people say that a lot, but there's people that genuinely serve others and people that just like say it, I feel. But it is true. Like if you really feel like you have the ability to help the world in this, you start to become this martyr of like, I don't care what's said about me. I don't care what happens to me. Like I feel like I'm genuinely helping people. Fuck the haters kind of thing, and let me go forward. I think that's like that's like an enlightened entrepreneurial state when people get to that, if they're truly that. Some people say that, but their actions don't really support that. But the ones that are, it's pretty impressive.
I have one last question before I ask that question. Where can people find you? What's your plug?
I think my best thing is my newsletter right now. So like it's nonverbalgroup.com/newsletter. And then I'm going to go very hard on YouTube in like 3 months. So what are we in? February, March, April. Yeah. The end of April or the beginning of May. So I'm doing, it's good. My YouTube is youtube.com/Blake_Eastman. And I'm basically doing nuanced things. So I'm doing like 90 minutes on marketing. It's just whatever I want, really. I'm going to do some people skill stuff, obviously, and reading behavior. I'm just going to do like the opposite of a short 5-tip thing. I'm just going to dive deep into a subject, discuss all the research, and just do like a 1 hour or 2 hour show on a specific thing. I think I got to shout out Mr. Huberman for doing that. He kind of made that acceptable, I feel like this long form that is desperately needed. And I want to be, if I'm going to be a like Masters of Nuance, I want to be part of those more nuanced conversations.
You've probably never heard this name, but the other example of that is Sam Sulek.
I do know that name. I don't know how though. I know that name very clearly.
Really? That shocks me. I mean, he definitely has like millions of subscribers on YouTube now, but he's more like he's bodybuilder type.
Oh yeah, that's how I know him. The guy that is everybody's talking about because he just like completely grew up by being just an organic, cool guy, right?
He does like 92-hour, 3-hour, just literally just him going through his day. Like there's no editing really. It's just like him sitting in the car driving and talking to the camera, and then he's in the grocery store and he's buying things.
I gotta watch one.
Yeah. I've never watched a whole episode. I understand the appeal because it's like reality TV and it's very just, I mean, real. I get it. I understand why people are attracted to it, but I don't have it. I mean, I do have time, but it's not how I want to spend my time, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's like that. Like Casey Neistat was the first one to come up with those like shorter videos.
For sure.
Yeah, that's
he still does that.
Casey still does those videos.
It's crazy.
Yeah. He's a savage.
He's been doing it longer than anybody.
Absolute savage.
It's mind-boggling. You've probably met him. He was in New York.
No, I never ran into him.
Oh.
I actually left when his podcast blew up, or else I probably would have saw him because I was in his area a lot.
Yeah. I know he runs the New York Marathon like every single year.
He's one of those. He's just massive creative, and also one of those really interesting people that if you look at, one of the coolest things I'll tell you, if you're an entrepreneur, like one of the things I really like doing is going on go on Mr. Beast's YouTube channel and look at his beginning videos.
Oh, yeah.
It's like so cool.
Yep.
It's like a video saying Logan Paul like over and over and over again, and has like all this crazy stuff, and like look who he is now just by really genuinely not stopping. And there's a lot of people like even Gary Vaynerchuk and like all these other like social people, and even what's the really big guy, the acquisition.com, Hermosi.
Oh yeah, Alex.
Like he was saying this, like, before he blew up, he had so many videos and all that. But that's if you want to quote unquote like blow up. I don't know what that means, but I feel like a lot of people are chasing that right now. Like, I want followers. But it's true. Followers, he's in more leverage than anything else.
Yeah.
It's powerful to have a following.
I think it is for sure. And I think what people underestimate is like the prerequisite though is you got to do this for like 10 years.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true.
Like you can have it, just do it for 10 years.
Yeah. It's so much, there's so much truth to that, man.
My last question, it's really whatever your best piece of advice is that you would give to your younger self or someone else in that circumstance of like, let's say you were to go back to ground zero of like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a business owner. I want to do my own thing. What would you tell them, or what would you tell your younger self in that circumstance in terms of like, there's a lot you could do, but what's the best piece of advice you'd give them?
If I was talking to myself, I should write like a really long email about that. But I would probably say get a coach. The quickest like piece of advice. Like you can't do this on your own. You need someone to like hold you accountable. You need a coach. Like I'm very big on coaching. I have like tons of coaches at any given time. I like to outsource like most of that type of stuff. And I was overconfident when I was younger, which was good, but which led to a lot of suffering. And I probably wouldn't, I always say this, I wouldn't have probably listened to myself though. Like my 21-year-old self was so sure of himself that I would have been like, oh, fuck off, old man. Like, what are you telling me to do? It's like, no, you don't understand. I am you.
Yeah.
In a different timeline. Like, not in this one, buddy. But yeah, that was a big thing. And then also if I were to give a second piece of advice to myself, it would have been like, focus, make one thing work before moving to the next thing. Because I bounced around a lot and I had a lot of success. Every time I would bounce around, I would be successful. But I should have just stayed with one thing. But I get bored, so I move on to something else when it's not really. And that led to a lot of, and also like, shout out to like love of my life and my wife. Like find someone that can support you. Like Molly was the first person I ever like dated that amplified my life in unmeasurable ways. So I think I'm not half the man I was if I haven't met her, because of all the lessons that, and we like shared that. And I think a partner in this journey is more important than you think. And you should go home to somebody that's going to champion you, support you, and push you, as opposed to maybe like hold you back or well, no one could hold you back, but like just not amplify your greatness or whatever.
Totally agree, man. I with the relationship I'm in now, I feel that exact same thing. Is the first person that I feel like is just so supportive and making me want to be a better person. So
yeah, and that's hard to
sure.
find, but when you do, like, hold on to it for sure. It's quite special.
Blake, thanks for being on the show, brother.
Thank you.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show, and if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.